We can appreciate them by combining Kłosowski's account of theophany, the manifestation of the god, with at least three other sources, which, of course, I don't have time to go into here, so we'll only be able to mention. The writings by Kłosowski on the Marquis de Sade, concerned with the dissolution of identity, his book Nietzsche and the Vicious Circle, which deals with repetition, and his book La Monnaie Vivante, Living Money. Broadly, the question concerns the relation between a singular experience, whether that comes from the inside, the drive, or outside the gods or another person, and that which is exchangeable, that which has a common or gregarious measure, like money. He uses the term grégaire. He's referring to his translation, I think, of Nietzsche. Another way of putting it would be in terms of the relation of prototype and stereotype. The prototype would be the phantasm formed by the drive, the stereotypes, the images that circulate in society, and the simulacrum would be that which comes between the two. Perversion, according to Kłosowski, lies in the absolute singularity, the unexchangeability, the refusal to exchange the fantasy. So the problem is, how does the prototype become a stereotype? This means that the simulacrum is the place of, one could even say the placeholder for, an impossible relation. This is the term that circulated among French thinkers and writers, including Lévinas and Blanchot in the 1950s and 60s, as un rapport sans rapport, a relation without relation. What is at stake is a relation with the singular or the other that does not reduce it to the same. In the sense that to mediate the singular through the qualities that it shares with other things, for example, is to reduce it to that which is exchangeable, whereby it loses its singularity. For example, I love my lover's grey-blue eyes, but my lover is not my lover because she has grey-blue eyes, because there are others with grey-blue eyes too. One such possible impossible relation to the absolutely singular, and to difference, as Kirke, Nietzsche, and Deleuze have taught us, is repetition. This is why we need to be monomaniacs and perverts, as Kłosowski described himself in 1978. I quote, "I am neither a writer, nor a thinker, nor a philosopher, nor anything else in any mode of expression, nothing at all, before having been, being, and remaining a monomaniac." End of quote. Is not the tableau then a kind of monomania? I would say that the tableau is not monomania, or at least not monomania alone, if you excuse the oxymoron, because it is theatre. Robert Sessoir tells through narration and dialogue of the theologically inclined aesthete Octave's law of hospitality, whereby he offers his wife, Robert, for the use of guests, including his nephew Antoine. The revocation of the Edict of Nantes reframes that action in alternating journal entries of Octave and Robert, whose status as a deputy in the parliamentary chamber is now emphasized. The third novel is called Le Souffleur ou le Théâtre de Société. A souffleur is a prompter in a theatre and also implies a puffer, someone who has difficulty breathing, but also in this context suggests pneuma, the Greek word for spirit or soul, and also inspiration. Jouer au souffleur is said of an actor who doesn't know his role and leans on the prompter. We could think here of the quality of performers in Kłosowski's drawings. In one of the scenes of the novel Le Souffleur, Théodore Lacaze, whose name literally means gift of God and the house, who is the double of Octave, stages rehearsals of Robert Sessoir, the book Robert Sessoir, in his apartment for friends. Rehearsal in French is répétition. The singularity of Robert is staged and therefore doubled in a repetition, the repetition that allows for difference, as in this case, the difference between the doubles. Repetition, though, is not exactly theatre. If the repetition is a rehearsal, it occupies a position neither inside nor outside theatre. Indeed, it doesn't have to take place within a theatre at all. I'm emphasizing this in order to suggest that, so far as the tableau is concerned, it may not be a matter of either theatre or not theatre. Indeed, the tableau may be neither inside nor outside the theatre, or both inside and outside. It may, for example, be either rehearsal or curtain call. The latter is precisely the mise en scène of one of the great tape slide works by James Coleman, Living and Presumed Dead, from 1983 to 85, which is both in the collection here and at the Musée d'Art Moderne in Paris. The work comprises projections from 3 carousels, which are overlaid on a single screen. So you see 2 screens, effectively. It's not like this. Each one is a single frame, but I put up 2 frames together here. These image projections sometimes create the effect of animations as they're overlaid on each other, as the characters in the wearing medievalish costumes in the lineup change places and perform actions. The story, narrated by an old man's voice with a rich Dublin grain, tells of characters whose names begin with the letters A, B, and C, who are engaged in a search or quest which, rather like Klusowski's trilogy, involves doubling and substitution. I go into this in some detail in the text published in a catalogue to Coleman's Renaissance Society Chicago and ICA exhibitions of 1985, and I can't do so here. It's a very complex and interesting work, and a lot needs to be said about it, so I refer you to that. Suffice it to say that the work exists on an edge between bodies and signs, and between the theatrical and the non-theatrical. The very lineup forms something like a lexicon from which characters take on meaning in relation to other characters and not as representations of some offstage life. Yet at the same time, there are moments of the application and removal of makeup, making up and making down, as if to move back and forth across a threshold, or more precisely to create a threshold to move back and forth across, which is also an impassable membrane or screen. That which is at once living and presumed dead may be nothing other than the work itself, as the recorded, living, resonating breath of speech and murderous writing inscribed on bodies, photographed, tableau vivant as tableau mort. What if we were to think of the tableau not as an object, but as a threshold? Obviously between front and back, something like a door, but also between inside and outside, and between itself and what is not itself, between the difference of its own doubling and its other. And not only a threshold, but also a word, tableau, and signifier, tableau, which functions in metaphoric and metonymic relations with other words and signifiers. The rhyme bateau tableau, for example, which is the untranslatable title of a work of 1973 by the Belgian artist Marcel Brotas. For Brotas, the tableau was also a table on which to accumulate mussel shells, the husks of departed eaten life, the Belgian national dish. Think also of tables of verbs or words. Just such an upended tableau hangs beside another word, dites partout que j'ai dit, que je l'ai dit, 1974, Say Everywhere I Said So, which was part of the installation Ne dites pas que je ne l'ai pas dit, le perroquet, Don't Say I Didn't Say So, the parrot, itself created as part of Décor, a series of retrospective exhibitions of Brotas's work. The parrot is, of course, a bird that repeats, as does the tape recording of Brotas that was part of the installation, itself a parody of the retrospective that frames the artist. May I say me, me, I say I. The king of muscles, me, you say you. I tautologize, I preserve, I sociologize. I manifest manifestly. At sea level of muscles I have lost, time lost. I say I, the king of muscles, the word of muscles. And the work, this part of the work is a tape recorder playing Broadtas reading this next to a cardboard box container of the tape recorder on which is written his famous fig inscription. Is to manifest manifestly to lose time lost. To lose the... Thank you. To lose the past, the memory, the trace, to manifest as spectacle, anti-mnemonically. What is the relation between the shifter I, said by me or whoever here and now, and the proper name king of muscles and the empty shells? Why am I saying this? To expand the extension of Tableau, to include its outworks, par erga, and to turn it inside out in such a way as to imply a topology other than that of the flat, framed rectangle on the wall, a tableau with more coordinates than two. As Broadtas reminds us in his work, speech is always in the language of others and the other. Broadtas's work is always concerned with its own alienation in relation to the institutions in which it is framed, which are also the conditions for its manifestation and conservation. There is always a double address to the language and institution as other and to the multiplicity of others in a potentially reciprocal sociality. We could therefore speak of the distinction between a theatricality that is alienating and a theatricality that is generative of social life, a bad and a good theatricality, as Michael Fried did earlier today. If it were not the case that the two are always undecidable, or at least almost inextricable. As Klosowski tells us, the singular is not expressible in anything other than the coin of the realm. These distinct yet intertwined modes of theatricality are brilliantly discussed by Phoebe von Held in her recently published book, Alienation and Theatricality in Diderot and Brecht, which I think is very much the best book on the topic so far. She describes how, in Diderot's Paradox of Acting of 1770 to 78 and elsewhere, that the gaze is inscribed positively as a creative and facilitating tool, where the actress experiences her dédoublement, her doubling in the eyes of the others, as active, constructive, and enabling. Theatre in this sense functions as a model and condition for sociality. But as von Held points out, theatricality, which she describes following Diderot as saturated and a plunge into exteriority, is also alienation into an economy, not only of the sign, but also of social relations of power and exploitation, as is intimated in the works that we've seen by both James Coleman and Marcel Broadtas. We might want to see the tableau in the expanded field, not in terms of theatricality and anti-theatricality, but rather as the place of an impossible relation between the two. Thank you.